Welcome to the Find Your Best Future podcast. This is the podcast that helps international families make great decisions when it comes to choosing university courses.
Well, today we're very honoured and privileged to have Doug Thomas, the International Recruitment Manager from Edinburgh University in Scotland. Doug, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and a very brief introduction to your university?
Sure, thanks, Jeremy. So, hello everyone. My name is Doug Thompson, and I'm the International Recruitment Manager for Europe at the University of Edinburgh. And I work in a department known as Student Recruitment and Admissions. A large part of our role is to provide advice and guidance to prospective students and just try and provide you with all the information you need about applying to us and what it's like to live and study here in Edinburgh. I've actually worked at the university now for over 11 years, so I guess I must like it here. And as for the university itself, well, we're very fortunate in the sense that we're one of the world's leading research universities, and we're one of the 6 ancient universities in the UK, 4 of which in Scotland, and we've been around since 1583, so we've been doing this for a while now. And it's one of the largest universities in the UK as well.
Just a rather off the script type of question, if you like. But what is it that you love most about your university, about working there? What sort of makes it special for you personally?
Yeah, well, I think, and this is something that I naturally get asked a lot, and it naturally will be different for everyone. But I think, and when you're applying to all of these great universities, and many of them have very similar strengths, international student community, world-class facilities, world-leading experts kind of teaching on them. But fundamentally, I think what makes Edinburgh that little bit different is the fact that and it was beautifully described by a recent graduate and friend of mine, that described it as a Goldilocks kind of city and Goldilocks University. It's not too big, it's not too small, it's just right. And it's kind of what I like about Edinburgh is the sense that you can have that big city university experience and be in the middle of a kind of dynamic, kind of fun city, but at the same time have that intimate setting if you're wanting to get to know kind of fellow students and staff, and there's just so much going on. It's all the stuff that happens outside of the classroom that makes it such a kind of rich and interesting setting. So there's all manner of kind of free lectures and events that you can go to, and kind of learn from all manner of different and wild and interesting people.
Now, Doug, many of the listeners here are probably not too familiar with the geography or even the climate of the UK. Could you just describe briefly where your university is located, what are the transport connections, your airports, etc., and also what the weather is like?
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, the university, we're very fortunate, is right in the middle of the city of Edinburgh. So Scotland's capital city, which in itself is a very, very small destination. There's only a population of about 525,000. So it's a city that's very easy to kind of get around. Most students will either walk or cycle, but there's great local public transport as well. So students will get discount on buses across the city. And as to the university, we're spread right the way across the city itself. So depending on what you're studying, you'll probably principally be based in one campus over another. But because it's such a small city, it's very easy to get between campuses and wherever you're staying in terms of housing. You won't really have far to go. And for the airports, it's only about 30 minutes either by bus or tram from the city. And when you get dropped off at the kind of central drop-off at the Waverley train station, it's only about a 10-minute walk from there to the university's main central campus. So in no time at all, you're kind of off the plane and at the university itself. And then the infamous question, Scotland and weather. Because yes, we must confess it does rain a bit here. It's certainly, we always advise international students, make sure you bring sort of waterproof clothing because you're going to need it. And it does get a little bit windy at times as well. But even though Scotland itself is, the world's most northern country outside of the Arctic, and on latitude in line with, Russia and Canada and the likes, it's not actually as cold as you would think. It's a relatively temperate climate being so close to the sea. So whilst our winters don't get as severe as you would see in other parts of kind of the Northern Circle, sadly, we don't get quite as warm summers either. So it's usually on average probably about 8 degrees during a year. And then it might get as high as 19, 20 degrees in the summer, although last year got over 30 and nearly, the whole country got over and fell over in shock. But it's generally not quite as cold as you would think. Thankfully, there's lots to do, so you can get indoors when it does get a bit wet.
Perhaps I should clarify this for the benefit of our non-British listeners. Doug just mentioned the fact that it's beside the sea and you need a rainproof jacket or coat. Well, yes, but I should point out the sea's not particularly warm for swimming, but people do go swimming in the sea off the coast of Scotland. So you might be one of these brave people who wants to give it a try. And Doug, you were talking just now about the transport inside the city of Edinburgh. Now, I've been to Edinburgh many, many times. It's a wonderful city and excellent public transport. Probably most listeners have seen pictures of those sort of red double-decker buses that they have in London and other British cities. Well, they've got them in Edinburgh too. So if you fancy an adventure, you jump on board and you run up the steps. And with a bit of luck, you get yourself a seat at the front, and it's lots of fun. So there's something to look forward to if you go and study in Edinburgh. But to talk a little bit about your university, I assume Edinburgh, like most British universities, is a publicly owned, publicly funded university.
Yes. So we're a public research institution, a charitable entity. So and that, like you say, is similar to most universities in the UK. Most are publicly and state owned.
Yeah. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the facilities that Edinburgh University has. The sort of teaching facilities, the libraries, the study areas, etc.
Yeah. So I mean, you're, I think, kind of fortunate when you come here because you've got a wealth of information at your fingertips. Because there's the main library itself, which is located right in the heart of the central area, and all round about that is where most of the schools of the arts and humanities and social sciences are based. So the majority of students will spend a fair bit of time in the library there. But thankfully, there's also an additional 11 satellite libraries located throughout the various other campuses. So all told, I think it's something like over 3.5 million different kind of copies and journals and books and the like that you have access to, and then a whole welter of online subscriptions and the like. So there really is no excuse when it comes to saying, "Oh, I couldn't find a book or find something to get in terms for a class or an assignment." It's pretty much all there for you. And then in terms of the other teaching facilities, well, naturally it varies from one subject to another. There are all manner of labs and workshops particularly for those in STEM subjects, right the way up to large scale lectures that you may have in your kind of first 2 years, and then smaller kind of teaching rooms for tutorials throughout your studies. But really, as you would expect of a university of our kind, the facilities are top notch. But I always say, at the end of the day, really what makes the university and your own experience of success is the people. So it's all nice having the kind of bells and whistles of those facilities, but fundamentally it's the connections that you make with the teaching staff and the student support staff that will make that university experience all the richer.
Now, I know students don't necessarily spend all their time studying or with their nose buried in a book or a laptop. What sort of sports and exercise facilities do you have? Because I think it's very important to have a sort of a healthy sort of work-life balance here. And perhaps you could also talk about the sort of facilities that you have for the theatre, performing arts, those sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the last couple of years, well, 2 and a bit years, have proved to us that health and well-being now is fundamental. And thankfully, I think universities in particular have taken that on board. So, all manner of support is there in place. But then, one of the great outlets for that is sport and exercise, and just getting out there and kind of finding that way to kind of switch off from assignments and studies and do something else. And again, we're kind of one of the leading sports universities in the UK. So many international sports teams, when they come to Edinburgh, will use our facilities. So there's the main Pleasant Sports Gym, which is located not far from the central campus and round the corner from our School of Education and Sport, which has all manner of gym facilities that you can make use of, and classes that you can attend. But then in addition to that, we've got smaller kind of satellite gyms located around the other campuses. There's the Peffer Mill Sports Complex, which has five-a-side football pitches, hockey pitches, where Scotland's National Hockey Academy are based as well. We have our outdoor centre up in Perthshire at Furbush. And if you do like outdoor sports, then absolutely get up there, because it's a breathtaking setting. There's really something for everyone, whether you're a kind of performance elite athlete and kind of following some of our kind of performance programs there, or if you're just wanting to go make some friends and just do something for fun and informal, then there's all manner of sports clubs you can join. There's close to 70 of them now at the university. So there's really lots for you to sink your teeth into.
I was looking on your website earlier on today at the list of sports on offer. I mean, it's just a huge variety of sports. And I noticed one that sort of got my attention. It says the Underwater Hockey Club. And there was a picture of someone swimming along the bottom of a swimming pool, but I'm still puzzled how that might work. But let's leave that thought, shall we? And perhaps move back to something which is even more important. One of the main reasons why people go to university, of course, you mentioned earlier on that the most important thing are the people, and the people who are going to be lecturing to you. Where do your lecturers come from? Do they come from Scotland, the UK, or further afield?
Much like our student community, the staff come from all over the world. Because again, it's another question get asked lots from international students when they're worried about coming to Scotland. They hear about the accent and they think, they get here and there's going to be a broad Scots accent that they can't understand. And to be honest, yes, you might get a Scots lecture that takes a little bit of time getting used to, but to be honest, you're much more likely to be hearing from lecturers and professors from all over the world. We have over 100 different nationalities amongst our teaching faculty, so it is a very, very international mix, and partly because we see ourselves as a global university. It's not just our students that we're expecting to have that global outlook, but our teaching staff as well, and attracting kind of world leading experts from all over to kind of bring in their perspectives and kind of teach on the program. So it makes for a very kind of rich and interesting mix.
So where do your students mainly come from? Are they mainly from the UK or from Scotland itself? Or?
No, not at all. I mean, we're totaling now just over 46,000 students and around about 28,000 at undergraduate level. And it's roughly split between a third come from Scotland, a third from the rest of the UK, and then a third from outside of the UK. I think it's over 160 different nationalities kind of represented amongst that. So it makes for just this wonderfully diverse melting pot of different cultures and perspectives. And, hopefully when you come, you get to kind of meet as many of these people from different walks of life and make friends for life, because that's kind of another one of the great consequences of coming to university is that ability to kind of build your network as you go through life.
Does your university have any sort of formal relationships with other universities, perhaps outside the UK, where the students can go and do exchange programs?
Yeah, I mean, as sort of being that global outlook that I talked about, there's currently over 300 international exchange partners that we have, and these agreements will vary in type. Some will be just very much about student ability, so kind of going on your year, either a semester or year-long exchange for one of our partners, or it could be a research agreement that's in place and having access potentially to kind of some of their teaching and research facilities. But just to give you an idea of kind of some of our research partners, we have key strategic ones in Europe in particular. So the likes of University of Copenhagen, Helsinki, University College Dublin, the University of Amsterdam, Leiden, Catholic University Leuven, and then further afield, you're all manner from the likes of University of Melbourne, Toronto. It really is quite an extensive list, and the handy thing is you can find this quite easily on the website by just kind of typing onto the web search, just where do I go, and that will bring up a list of all of the our partner universities. But there's lots for you to kind of explore and opportunities for our students.
I mean, that's a very impressive number of universities that your students can go to. And I think for those students who are listening to this episode, I think it's an extremely worthwhile aspect of your education, if at all possible, to go and do an exchange program, because it really opens your eyes to a new way of working, a new culture, a new country. And I'm very happy to see that Edinburgh really fosters this with its undergraduate students. I have to ask you this question about its rankings. Now, rankings, people often place great store in the rankings, and we've actually made a podcast episode on this topic. It's obviously fairly complex. What are your takings on the rankings, and indeed, where does Edinburgh stand in the rankings?
Yeah, so it's the first thing I always say is take it with a pinch of salt.
That's what I say too.
The thing about rankings, I mean, the metrics for them are very different from one set to another, and I think as it is a useful proxy and a way of introducing yourself to kind of narrow down that search, because of course you have a dizzying array of universities and courses to choose from. And trying to kind of whittle that down to what you think best represents your interests. But it will always come back to the point I said at the outset, that really you want to try and find, connecting with the right people and getting a sense, is this the right fit for me? Is this a university that I can see myself at? Is it a city that I can see myself in, or a town? Depending on kind of whether you want something that is a big city-based university or something that is much more small and campus-based and intimate. But in terms the rankings, look at a number of them. Don't just go by one, and then see if there seems to be a pattern emerging, that the university is performing highly in across all of them. That the particular subject rankings that they're performing highly. We're fortunate at Edinburgh that we tend to do quite well. In particular, the kind of research impact and the kind of citations of our researchers are high, and that generally across these international rankings is what ultimately determines where universities finish. But also that internationalization and the mix of our student and staff and the fact that they come from all over the world, that also plays a major part. So you can look at, say, the QS rankings, which are kind of one of the more widely sort of used by students and kind of prospective students around the world. We finished 15th for this year, so we're doing pretty well.
That's amazing, because it's 15th out of several hundred or even several thousand universities. That's really extremely highly ranked, I would say.
And I think probably in addition, and one that I always like to draw attention to, given all that's going on in the world right now, the latest sustainability rankings that QS brought out. And, hopefully there will be listeners here that do have a big focus on trying to make the world a better place, because if so, then please come to us, because we're very much looking for the next generation in this area. And, we finished fourth in the world for those, and are the only one in the UK in the top 10. So, I mean, that's very much a big part of our ethos and a lot of the programs that we're offering at the moment. So it gives you an idea about what a university is about, but fundamentally, once you've looked at the rankings, start to look into more about, the individual courses, get in touch with kind of staff and students at those universities and see if, it works for you.
So let's dig in a little bit and talk about the courses that Edinburgh University is offering. I assume because you're such a large university, you have a very large offering for prospective students. But which courses do you find are the most popular with your international students, or is it fairly broadly spread across the different departments?
Yeah, so I mean, we offer nearly 400 degree programs, so right the way across the arts, humanities, and sciences. We don't cover everything, but we do come pretty close. And as you would expect, there are certain sort of subjects that are particularly popular. So, business will always receive a lot of applications, and the likes of management and accounting and finance is very, very popular. Politics and international relations will get quite an international mix in terms of the applications. And then, of course, when it comes to levels of competition, medicine, veterinary studies are particularly selective and tough to get into. But then other courses now that we're seeing sort of growing levels of interest, biological sciences, psychology, economics. There's engineering is always a big one. And then one that's probably been the most competitive and popular for a number of years now, computer science and artificial intelligence. So it gives you an idea that, we offer a lot of different subjects and different courses. But the good thing is just to get a sense of kind of what those application numbers are like and how competitive those courses are. You can just simply type admission statistics into the search engine on our website, and that will bring up some basic stats for you, just to kind of help you in your search.
What qualifications do students end up with when they graduate from Edinburgh?
Yeah, so it's one of the quirks of the ancient universities, and often something that will confuse people when they first start looking, either through the UCAS website or through our own website. They'll see a lot of courses listed as MA and think that we offer a lot of master's courses. For whatever reason, back many, many years ago, we decided that at the ancient unis that we would call many of our bachelor's degrees Master of Arts. And it consequently had the knock-on effect that a lot of our master's programs in the arts and humanities are actually Masters of Science, even though they're not necessarily so scientific. So a lot of the courses will have MA attached to the front of them, so don't be confused if you see that. They very much are the undergraduate degree. But, it can range considerably. It's actually surprisingly easy to have a different academic qualification listed on the degree certificate. So it could be a Master of Arts, it could be a Bachelor of Arts, or you can then get into very specific subject qualifications. But, the range of degrees that we offer can start at 4 years long, could go up to 6 years in the case of medicine. There is a wide range of qualifications across the close to 400 programs.
I think it's probably worth at this point for our non-British listeners to point out that the UK actually has 4 constituent parts: England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland. And Scotland is a little bit different in the sense that a bachelor degree is normally 4 years, whereas in the other parts of the UK, it's a 3-year program. So I think if you're out there researching courses, you just need to be aware of that. Perhaps we can move on a little bit. So we talked earlier on about exchange programs. You mentioned a list of very impressive universities around the world that your students can go to. But are your students also able to go and do sort of internships or job placements as part of their bachelor course?
Yeah, I mean, it will very much vary from one sort of subject area to another, but it's particularly the case within STEM subjects that you will have industrial placements, and certainly if you don't just choose the 4-year degree program, but what's known as the integrated masters, the 5-year that's offered across our sciences, you will have that opportunity kind of built into the program. Other areas might have something known as sponsored dissertations, where that final project you do in your 4th year will allow you to kind of work within an organization and explore a particular theme that they are interested in, and that forms the bulk of your project. Or if there's not anything that's formally embedded in your program per se, then our career service provide all manner of information about various opportunities that you can take up during your time in Edinburgh. And quite often, a lot of students will do it over the summer, because you have around about 3 months between the end of the previous year and the start of the following year, with which to either do a spot of travelling, see the rest of Scotland, or take up one of the internship opportunities. So there are lots and lots of opportunities to take up, because I think what often gets overlooked when people talk about Edinburgh, we naturally focus on the cultural aspects and city life and the fun side, but Edinburgh itself is, the second largest commercial centre in the UK. So there's all manner of industry on our doorstep and opportunities for our graduates. So it's, something that you absolutely will be able to take advantage of whilst you're here.
You mentioned now that you'd have time to perhaps go and travel around Scotland. I can absolutely recommend it. If you've never been to Scotland, it's a stunningly beautiful country. There's really so much to do and so much to see. So if you come to study at Edinburgh University, please factor in a little bit of time to travel around Scotland. You definitely won't regret it. And I'm saying all this, and I'm, first of all, not a Scot, and I'm not working for the Scottish Tourist Board either, but it's absolutely worth visiting. So before we move away from this, perhaps we could just talk briefly about the teaching style, because a lot of students place great emphasis on whether it's a traditional teaching style with lectures or more problem-based learning. What is the sort of dominant teaching style at Edinburgh University?
It's going to be a mix. I think and again, as is always the case, it will vary from one area to the next. But typically, and usually in your first couple of years or so, you will have some large-scale lectures, because we're wanting to get a lot of information over to you, and quite in many cases, a broad set of information. So even when you do start to specialize in your later years, you're still equipped with a lot of other themes and other perspectives that will kind of help you kind of further down the line, should you decide to kind of change path or change tack. You will have access to that information. But then we're very much not expecting that you simply just have to absorb this information and regurgitate it, because fundamentally at university, we're wanting you to question things and go, why is it done this way? Should it be done this way? And so the problem-based learning very much will be part of the teaching you receive from the outset, but very much the focus when you get into those later years and smaller scale teaching and tutorials. So it's, you can't get away from the lectures. It's not necessarily everyone's cup of tea, but it's absolutely something that you do need as part of a university degree, just to give you that grounding. And now, since we've kind of come through COVID, there's starting to be different perspectives on how we present that teaching. So it's not necessarily the traditional method of going into a big large scale lecture theatre. There could be some hybrid learning as part of that, and online recordings that you can make use of. But yeah, by the time you get into years 3 and 4, it's very much a focus on you trying to bring in your own arguments and reasoning and critical analysis to kind of get to the bottom of a problem.
How are students assessed? Are they mainly assessed on sort of end-of-year exams, or is it more a continuous assessment process throughout the academic year?
So it's pretty common that the end of semester exams are going to form a large part of your final mark for the course, but you will be assessed throughout the year as well, and these will range. There, could be group projects and presentations. Could be mini-scale reports that you do kind of partway through. So, it's not just going to be one exam that forms 100% of the final mark. There could well be attendance that's kind of factored in, and kind of your contributions in class that form a small part of the mark. So there's lots of different weightings that they will have in order to calculate your coursework over the year. But hopefully what the course and the teaching is trying to do is kind of tease out sort of different skills and help you develop in different areas. So, it's not just you going, reading a book, and then trying to remember all the answers and get it down for the exam at the end of the year. You still will have some of that, but hopefully, we'll be able to develop other areas through your degree as well.
Now, before a student can benefit from Edinburgh's undoubted world-class teaching and research, they actually have to get accepted into the university. And because Edinburgh is a highly ranked university, it's obviously a competitive university to get into. So students that I work with, they always ask me, what sort of a student are they looking for? They're kind of looking for an edge or an angle to sort of maximize their chances of getting in. Have you got anything to say on this topic? Is your particular profile or type of student that your university is actually looking for?
Well, I suppose yes and no. There's never a kind of quick answer to this. But firstly, we're going to be looking for the best and the brightest. So we want students that are performing well academically and getting close to the best possible grades. But then after that, it is very, very much a case of, well, we want to see that you're passionate about the subject, and well, as it stands at the moment, personal statements and kind of a sense of that you understand the subject, that you kind of know what you want to do with the degree going further on, and kind of what particular themes might be within that particular subject you're interested in. But we're also just wanting to get a sense of who you are, and I think it's worth when you're researching the universities and getting a sense, are you the right fit for that university? Understanding what that particular subject area and academic school is about and what they offer. It could well be, say if you're applying for law, for instance, we basically want argumentative people. So people that are always looking to question, those that are part of debating societies and doing that kind of outside interest and super curricular activity, just to get a sense that, you could well fit in well here along with your high grades. Or if you're interested in computing, what programming knowledge do you have? What kind of types of competitions have you been involved in? So there's no kind of one magic answer to this, but it really comes down to you as the individual person and potentially kind of what else is included in your application that might give you the edge over someone with a similar high grade profile that may well result in us giving you the offer.
Obviously, you are looking for high grades no matter what school leaving exams that the listeners might be taking. But many of the people listening to this podcast will be coming from countries where English is not the native language. Do you need evidence of language proficiency in order to enter Edinburgh University?
Absolutely. So, I mean, it's no matter where you're from in the world, we need to see a requisite language level and proof of English proficiency in order to get onto the program. Now, more often than not, it will come through, what you're studying in high school. So you're studying in English as part of your school qualifications. If you meet a certain level, then that will be sufficient. If not, then you would have to take an additional language test, such as an IELTS or a TOEFL or a Cambridge test. But all of that information and kind of what we would look for is including what's known as our degree finder, which lists all of the programs we offer and the necessary entry requirements. And then also a link to the English language requirements page, which will list all of the high school qualifications that we would accept for English language purposes.
Now, we've been talking about the academic program at Edinburgh University. What kind of academic support is offered to students? I mean, sometimes students struggle in various ways with their studies.
Absolutely, and let's face it, it's a pretty common experience. At some point during university, you'll go through that imposter syndrome and think, "Why am I here? I can't do this." And needless to say, at the outset, if we've accepted you and given you the offer, then you absolutely are good enough. But naturally, there could be certain obstacles that you come up against, and at the very outset, all students will have either a personal tutor or a student advisor that they can go to talk about. It could be the course options when they're wanting to choose optional courses for the semester and just wanting a little bit of guidance, or if they're starting to encounter any additional learning problems, who do I need to now talk to? Because once you've had that initial conversation, if there's what's known as a learning profile that would need to be put in place, so people that might have specific learning difficulties or extra support needed, then we would then put you in touch with our student disability service, and then they would then discuss, what support we can put in place for you. And then throughout the year, each of our academic schools have a student support office where there's professional support staff on hand to kind of help you with any queries or concerns that you might have. But then we'll also keep a record of kind of how you're performing throughout the year. So if you start to encounter difficulties and your marks start to drop, then they can flag that up, pass that on to the relevant academic support, and then set up a meeting just to see, right, what support extra support can we give you just to try and sort of get those marks back up again. And then outside of that formal structure, there is, of course, the Students' Association, because the kind of peer support that they provide is fantastic. So it could well be you're just trying to get used to a kind of learning in this new environment, this new country, and the Students' Association can go, right, okay, well, older students kind of within your particular academic school, or we could have just global buddies who are just there to kind of sit, have a chat with you, just try and kind of help you with anything that you might need help with. There's lots of different ways and avenues for you to connect either with staff or fellow students to try and help you during the year. The only real thing that you need to do as that individual is just talk to us. So as long as you kind of reach out, then there'll be those on hand to help you.
I mean, it sometimes happens that a student is struggling academically because they've got some other sort of background, social or emotional issues going on in their lives. How does the university support students in that situation?
Yeah, well, and again, in particular, the last couple of years, that's come right to the forefront. And Edinburgh, I mean, the Student Disability Service are very much at the forefront of this, and they're kind of one of the leading sort of exponents in helping students in that way. And they're part of what's now the new Health and Wellbeing Centre, which is right in that sort of bespoke new facility that houses the counselling service, the disability service, the local doctors, and the pharmacy just on one site. So it's kind of an easy go-to portal if you have any concerns raised. But then there's the kind of formal structures that I talked about just now about, reporting, and you go to your personal tutor or student advisor if you have any concerns. And then if it is something specific that we need to put in touch with specialist support staff, then it will get referred on. And naturally, all of this is done confidentially. And then we'll, make sure that, you've got all the support and help that you need. And it could well be that actually it's not necessarily, when we get to the bottom of it, that it might not be something that's solely just about the pastoral nature. If it's just, actually what we need to put in place is just to give you a bit more understanding about academic referencing or something like that. Then we can refer you on to, the Institute for Academic Development, which run a whole manner of study skills workshops and the like, which become particularly useful around assignment times. There is, the support network at Edinburgh is extensive, but again, it just comes back to that issue of just talk to us if you need help. Reach out. And finally, just cannot stress enough that often just speaking to fellow students is a big help, because at the end of the day, you're all in the same boat together. And if you've got particularly talking to your friends and talking to classmates about what your concerns might have, either they'll be able to reassure you and help you from that moment on, just be there as just some support, or suddenly discover they're actually feeling the same way, and this makes it not quite so daunting.
I think it's a very valid point you make, because talking to the students, high school students that I work with, when they're faced with the prospect of going away to university, they have a mix of emotions, everything from fear to extreme joy, and everything in between. But I think it's worth pointing out that if you are in that position as a listener and you're about to go away to university, it's really important to understand that all your fellow students will be in the same position as you, and you sort of help each other and talk to each other, and you sort of get through this together. The most important thing is don't sort of sit there on your own and think there's no help there, because just reach out and talk to people. Doug, health services on the campus, I assume that you have them. Perhaps you could just describe what they are.
Yeah, so within the sort of largest of the university campuses in the central area, there's the local GP practice and pharmacy, which is right there on within the health and wellbeing centre itself. But then when you kind of start in your first week, when you come for Welcome Week, one of the kind of practical things that you need to do is register with a local GP, a local doctors, and our kind of pre-arrival and induction team that kind of oversee Welcome Week, provide you with that information, and then local National Health Service staff will be then coming onto the campus to kind of help with you get sort of registering, and how you do that is usually tied to where you're staying. So kind of near to kind of your local area, you can then register with a local doctor and get that sort of thing done. And then really it's after that, other kind of practical aspects to understand is that for international students, there's something known as the International Health Surcharge, which you have to pay. And that actually comes as part of your visa requirements when coming into the UK, in order to have access to all the health services and the like. But fundamentally, once you are here as a student, then you will have access to a whole range of health support. And it's not just the doctors. Again, it's the counselling service, it's the disability service that are on hand should there be more specific requirements that you and support that you need.
So let's move ahead a little bit to the end of the week, and you have finished up your studying, and now it's time to enjoy yourself. What sort of things do Edinburgh University students get up to at the weekends or in the evenings?
there's probably a few things that I can't talk about in that regard, but I mean, I think it's one of the big selling points of Edinburgh, is the city itself, because for such a small city, it is remarkable what the amount of things that you can do in an evening and a weekend. There's a whole range. I mean, ranging from museums and galleries. Most museums and exhibitions are free. So, you won't have to pay. It's only really kind of the high-end exhibitions that might have a charge, but if they do, student discount will go a long way, right the way through till sort of pubs and bars and clubs and restaurants. It used to be, I'm not sure, since COVID, it might have changed with, sadly, with some businesses closing, but Edinburgh had the record of more restaurants per head than any other city in the UK, and it kind of oscillated between us and London as to how that was. But we're known as, well, we were awarded the foodie capital of the UK last year, so it's certainly, I think, pretty close. And when I do talks such as this and talking to international students, it always comes down to food at some point. Usually at my behest, because I do love my grub. But there's a huge range of lovely eateries right next to the university. And they range from all manner of different things. It could be Brazilian, Korean, Indian, Thai, Sudanese, Afghan. I mean, there's the works all right next, and you're spoilt for choice.
What about traditional Scottish cuisine? Is there anything that our international students should try when they come to Scotland?
Absolutely. And I think we do have a reputation for just deep frying everything. And yes, that does happen, but it absolutely isn't what Scottish cuisine really is about. And I think that may be a slight surprise to you. The quirky things to try, though, and may not be to everyone's tastes, there's haggis, which is basically...
I love haggis.
I do as well. But yes, when people realise what it is, they can be a little bit off-put, but it's basically the innards of a sheep just wrapped in a sheep's stomach. But it is delicious, trust me.
It really is, yes.
Or if you don't want to go down the meat version, there is a vegetarian version as well, and that's a particular delicacy. And then if you kind of go, I would actually say venture out of Edinburgh a little bit and go a bit further north up the east coast, where you'll get some of the best fish and chips you're likely to find, and it's some absolutely delicious seafood. There's the likes of smokies, there's kind of smoked fish. Is one of my favourite things, and absolutely delicious up and around Fife. But then, Scotland itself, salmon, langoustines, all manner of meats, beef, lamb, venison. There's lots of kind of traditional Scottish dishes that way. And then my favourite of all Scottish dishes is Cullen skink, which effectively, I suppose, is leek and potato soup with a lot of cream and a lot of smoked haddock. Absolutely delicious, especially at this time of year when it's really cold. So I would heartily recommend that to anyone.
Actually, just a sort of a tip for our listeners, if you come to study in the UK, anywhere in the UK, Scotland, England, wherever, and you want to try fish and chips, you really need to ask a local, where is the best chippy, as it's called, or fish and chip shop? Because fish and chips can, as Doug just suggested, be absolutely excellent. It can also be, well, let's say less than excellent. So ask a local, they're always friendly, and they will point you in the right direction. So we sort of got into this whole sort of culinary bit about Scotland that I wasn't expecting, but listening to you talk about all those foods, I mean, I obviously don't live in the UK. I'm here in Austria, and I'm sitting here and I haven't had my dinner yet. My mouth is watering, thinking, gosh, yes, I'd love to have some of that. However, it's going to have to be, I think, a takeout sushi from the little Chinese place around the corner, because I haven't really got time to cook much this evening. However, I suppose we should get back to talking about university and higher education, Doug. Otherwise, we could go on this topic forever. Perhaps we could talk a little bit about when students have graduated from Edinburgh. how is your alumni network? Because it's so important to be well connected in your future professional career. Can you say a little bit about how Edinburgh Alumni Network functions?
Yeah, and I think it's something that we will encourage students, during your degree, reach out to, our various alumni networks and find out, how did you get to where you are today, on the back of your Edinburgh degree. And that can be done either through the academic school that you're in or through our specific alumni and development team, who will organise events as well. There's a database that you can sign up to connect with alumni in that way, or it could just be when you're back in your hometown, sort of connecting up with the local alumni association that's active there. And from a European perspective, we have particular areas where they are very, very active. So Brussels, Amsterdam, Paris, Berlin, Helsinki, Madrid, and Athens, are very, very active indeed. So there's often either formal events that are put on where, there might be sort of guest talks and evening receptions, right the way down to just informal get-togethers, meeting up on a Sunday afternoon for some lunch or a drink or two, and just catching up and kind of regaling stories about life back in Edinburgh. There's lots of ways, and it is a large alumni pool that you can connect with, because it comes back to what you said at the outset about this global outlook that we have, and you being able to hopefully make friends for life and can stay in touch with kind of fellow classmates whenever you all return home to different parts of the world, and hopefully it may well be that it even helps you in your career further down the line as well.
I suppose that all this is going to happen after you've graduated from Edinburgh University, but let's sort of turn the clock back to your first day when you arrive as a new student, year one. What sort of support do you offer these incoming students who've probably come either from different parts of the UK and don't know Edinburgh, or else they've come from abroad? How do you support them when settling in? Because it's obviously something which can be a little nerve-wracking for an 18-year-old leaving home for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something that we naturally understand because we've all been through it at some point. And the help begins before you even get to Edinburgh. So once you've got that offer, and once, say, get into August, and just before you depart, you'll be sent lots of information from your academic school and course handbooks, and just trying to give you an idea of, these are the types of things that you're going to be doing in the first semester, types of things to kind of prepare for. But then there's a pre-arrival and induction team who oversee all the events of Welcome Week when you're here in Edinburgh, but they also provide a wealth of information before you get here to help you kind of prepare for life in Edinburgh, and oversee what's known as the New Students website, which has all manner of practical guidance. You could join various Facebook groups just to kind of connect with other students that are kind of new to coming to the university as well. And then once you arrive in Edinburgh and report into kind of just university housing and speaking to our accommodation team, each halls of residence and each set of student housing has their own what's known as Res Life team, which is a warden and resident life assistants who are there to kind of help you settle in, but then also put on all manner of various cultural events and kind of get-togethers. So you can start to meet other students within the halls, but then also get a feel for Edinburgh as well. And then during Welcome Week itself, there's all manner of events and activities put on either through the Students' Association or through your academic school. There's lots and lots of different ways to find out about Edinburgh, whether it's trying haggis or joining in a ceilidh, which a ceilidh is basically Scottish country dancing, and a very, very fun way to spend an evening. Basically, don't worry if you don't know the steps or the moves to the dance. you basically just spin round lots and get thrown about the dance floor, and it is a lot of fun.
Yeah, actually, Kaylee's are a lot of fun. Doug, perhaps our students are going to see a poster up somewhere advertising a Kaylee, but they might not recognize the word as being Kaylee. Could you maybe spell it for us so they'll know what they're looking at?
Yeah, so there's basically a lot of silent letters in Gaelic. So
Yeah.
Ceilidh as it, is actually spelled so Ceilidh. There's a little bit of
That's the Kaylee, yeah.
Gaelic left for
I
you.
mean, as you said, it's a Gaelic word. For those who don't know, Scotland actually has a very old language, Gaelic, which is spoken mainly out in the west, on the islands on the western side of Scotland. But don't worry, if you only speak English, you'll get along just fine in Edinburgh. It won't be a problem for you. Now, a question I often get asked by my students is accommodation. Is it guaranteed for first-year students? Is it guaranteed for the whole 3 or 4 years of the bachelor degree? How is this at Edinburgh University?
Yeah, so I mean, there's the short answer is in first year, all students from outside of the UK are guaranteed accommodation. So we're fortunate that we have a very, very large suite of housing at the university. All of it is centrally located, so you won't have to spend much time at all getting from door to door when getting to classes, and it's very much a range of accommodation. So there could be either the most pricey end, the kind of single ensuite rooms, right the way down to kind of shared flats and self-catered. It very much varies depending on your your particular tastes, but all of that information is on our accommodation pages, so you can kind of go on there, have a look at the different types of housing that's available, how much they'll cost throughout the year. But then when you get into later years, most commonly is that students will move out of university halls in second year and move into private housing. Now, it must be said it can get a little bit trickier to find housing in Edinburgh if you leave it late, because the rental market is very, very competitive. And what happens is that if students leave it until August to look for private flats in September the following year, there's a small matter of the International Festival Fringe being in Edinburgh, and you won't find anything in Edinburgh during August. So it can be a little bit problematic. But the good thing is...
Yeah, I think you sort of mentioned that Edinburgh is obviously a large university, so there's a lot of students looking for accommodation, but it's worth pointing out that Edinburgh is not the only university in that city. There are other universities there too with students who will also be looking into the private market. So I think your advice, to start looking early is very good advice. Are there halls of residence which are gender separated? Because some families, people are looking specifically for that.
Yeah, so I mean, there's various preferences that you can put in. So once you have your unconditional offer, you're ready to start with us, then you can apply for accommodation, and within that you submit your 5 choices. So I kind of talked about that top level choice of whether you want self-catered or catered, single ensuite, shared. But then within that you can specify if you do want just a single sex kind of halls, or whether there's other things to factor in. It could well be that you're wanting a particularly quieter block. Could well be that you have particular religious beliefs, and it could well be that you're not wanting to share with certain people. It could be just vegetarian or anything like that. Then you can submit all of this information as part of the accommodation application, and then we can sort of allocate accordingly. Because how we allocate at the university isn't done on a first come, first served basis.
Thank you. I suppose we should mention food briefly. When students are in the hall of residence, they obviously have kitchen facilities where they can prepare their own food. But during the day, when a student leaves the accommodation in the morning and probably comes back in late afternoon or early evening, they're going to be on campus. They're going to be attending lectures on and off the whole day, and will presumably want to purchase some lunch from one of the cafeterias on the campus. Approximately how much does a student need to pay for a lunch? And I guess you have like a sort of swipe card, or they just swipe a credit card. Is that how it's organized?
Well, there's various ways you can go about it. So yes, I mean, there's done where you can sort of pre-purchase and have the sort of contactless and using the card that way specific within university cafes, or simply just through your own personal account. And it very much varies as to how much you pay each lunchtime. Naturally, the university cafes and just grabbing a quick sandwich or a coffee and a pastry will be cheaper. Or if you're feeling a little bit more flush and willing to spend £6-7 upwards at lunchtime, then you can go to one of the many kind of delicious restaurants that are kind of scattered around the university itself. But yeah, I mean, budgets and costs will naturally vary considerably, but usually there's plenty of sort of choice for you when you come out at lunchtime. But particularly in and around the central area, it can get quite busy. So yeah, you've got to kind of time it to making sure that you're not just trying to give yourself 5 minutes before a lecture at 1 o'clock. You could struggle in that regard.
Now it's time to start talking money, because of course universities charge tuition fees, and then there are the other costs as well. But perhaps you could outline the tuition fee costs for students at Edinburgh University.
Yes, so I think it's worth outlining that again. We mentioned this at the beginning, that Scotland does things a little bit differently from the rest of the UK, and that certainly comes into play when we're talking about fee status and subsequent tuition fee costs. Because for students, depending on kind of what your fee status, you're categorised either as local Scots, in which case your fees are covered by the Scottish government. If you fall into the rest of UK, then it's £9,250, or the international people, in which case fees can vary considerably and are considerably higher. And depending on the subject, at Edinburgh it could range anywhere from £24,000 a year right way up to £35,000. So it's absolutely in your interest to kind of do that research. You can go onto our web pages, find out what your likely fee status will be, and then have a subsequent look at what the likely tuition fee costs will be for you during your at least 4 years of study.
In addition to the tuition fees, of course, we were talking just now about housing, and then there are other costs as well to factor in, like sort of buying yourself some food and bus tickets and bits and pieces. So approximately how much a month do you think a student needs to budget to actually live in Edinburgh?
Well, it can, of course, vary, but we usually say approximately about £1,100 a month will cover you for all your rent and daily living costs. The good thing is, because Edinburgh is such a student-centric city, not just ourselves, but 3 other universities in the city, there are lots of ways to kind of save and budget during the day. So all manner of shops will offer discounts for students. It's not just public transport where you can make savings, but food and the like as well. So that's absolutely something you will pick up quickly when you come into Edinburgh.
Now we've been talking about sort of spending money, and the other side of the coin, of course, is earning money in the first place. Is it possible for foreign students to actually work in Scotland and earn some money alongside their studies? Is it legally permissible?
Yes, although there are conditions. So if you come in on a student visa, you're permitted to work for paid employment up to 20 hours per week. If you go over that, then you're going to incur the wrath of the UK Home Office, and you absolutely don't want to be doing that. But irrespective of where you're from in the world, or just a local student, when you start with your studies with us, you're given access to our jobs database, My Career Hub, and that will list all opportunities, whether they're internships and the like, or it could be part-time work, or graduate opportunities afterwards as well. But there's lots of ways to find that paid employment. And it could be just working in a cafe, or it could be something more attached to your degree, or even joining our student ambassador team and helping give campus tours and participating in student panels, helping out at open days, where we're actually, one of the sort of best paid kind of student ambassador schemes in the UK. So that's always something that we try to promote, because we always like to add to our student pool each year.
I can actually tell you, Doug, that because I go and visit a lot of universities as a college counsellor, and I'm always shown around the campus by a student, or perhaps a group of students. And for me, it's one of the most useful and interesting parts of my visit to a university. It's just to have that chance to sort of talk to the students as you walk around the campus, and just chat to them about their impressions of their academic program and what it's like to live in that city and study at that university. So, and I think that the ambassadors do an excellent job. And if you are listening to this podcast and you might be about to become a university student, as Doug says, it's a great job. See if you can get a job as a student ambassador. Now, the other aspect of finance, apart from work, is financial aid. And now, a lot of our international students have researched the possibility of studying in the United States, where financial aid is large and very often generous. But how is it structured in the UK, or more specifically at Edinburgh University? Is there actually financial aid available for students coming in?
Sadly, it's not as comprehensive as it is in the States, or even anywhere close, because at Edinburgh there's only a small handful of scholarships available at undergraduate level, and they're very much tied to specific subject areas. So I know that there's small awards in the likes of School of History and Mathematics, but it's not very much, certainly not the case across the board. And you're usually only talking about maybe £5,000. So when you're paying 24,000 plus, and it's not going to go very far. Most students that come with funding to Edinburgh do so from their home countries, and will do it through either government-backed schemes or private sponsorship. Sadly, we're just not in a position to offer much in the way of undergraduate scholarships. But it's worth looking. Other Scottish universities do, and in particular for European students here, will offer either substantial discounts and pin their fees in line with home students, or will offer larger scholarships as well. So do have a look around. But sadly, at Edinburgh, we don't offer that much.
I think it's worth pointing out that it's unrealistic to expect the same level of financial aid that you see in the United States if you're applying to the UK, no matter which university you're going to. It's just a different system. Okay, we'll stop there, and then we can move on to visas, which is a fairly... I'm not going to read through all these questions for the visas, but perhaps I'll just ask you to sort of outline how students go about applying for a visa. That's it, really.
Yep.
Okay. So let's go for it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now, before a student can even arrive in the UK from a foreign country, they will need to have a student visa, because you cannot just enter the UK as a tourist and expect to sort it out later on. You actually need to get your study visa, your student visa sorted out. So how does a student go about doing this?
Okay, so yes, this is an important part of that final part of the application that you do not want to get wrong. You need to be very, very careful when submitting the visa application, but thankfully there's lots of help and support on hand during this part of the process, because each UK university will have its own dedicated student immigration team who will provide visa advice for you. So when you come to start a degree in the UK, you have to apply through the student route, and that will mean that one of the conditions being 20 hours of paid work per week, for instance. But what happens is that when you've got the unconditional offer, you will then fill out the visa application form, go to your local visa centre, and then they will process that visa application, hopefully in plenty of time for you to arrive in the UK ahead of your studies. But you've got to get that key information right, and it actually costs you. So there'll be the cost of the visa itself. There is, of course, the immigration health surcharge that I mentioned before, and the cost of that. And then just when you're coming into the UK, you will also have to provide proof of funds, potentially, when you're checking with customs. But all of this is talked through step-by-step guidance on our student immigration pages. If it becomes kind of a little bit overwhelming, which is understandable, then you can make an appointment with our visa advisors and talk through the process and just understand what it is that you need to do. Different types of visas processing can exist. So you can do the express service in some areas. So if it is getting towards the end of the summer and you're a bit worried about kind of later start dates and the processing times, then potentially you can be done a little bit quicker. But ideally, you'll be applying for your visa once you've got that unconditional offer, start of the summer, giving yourself plenty of time ahead of the studies commencing in September.
If we take a look, a sort of a holistic look at the entire 4 years that a student will spend studying for a bachelor degree at the University of Edinburgh, what sort of skills does a student typically develop? I know parents are particularly interested to know, where do your graduates go on to work? Where do they use these skills? What are the typical careers that students move on to when they leave Edinburgh University?
Yeah, and I think it's one of the advantages of the Scottish system, that with it being the 4-year rather than the 3-year degree employed elsewhere in the UK, those first couple of years and giving you the opportunity to take more outside courses, a little bit more flexibility in your degree, just allows you to, well, not only get a broader knowledge base, but also get different perspectives on certain themes and kind of develop during the degree itself. But something that we place great faith in is just ensuring that, once our students are out the door, that they are very much employable, that they've got a wide skill set. We are not just expecting you to be well versed in a particular subject area, but you're getting exposed to different areas. So it could well be within group work, presentations, mock interviews, different ways that we were kind of building you up to ensure that when you get out and in front of an employer, you stand the best possible chance of getting that job. Now that will either come through formally within the degree itself, or you can make appointments with our careers service and have kind of one-to-one appointments with our careers consultants and see, right, these are the sort of areas that actually I need to improve. What is it that I can do to help me look better in these interview situations? And they can help develop those soft skills for you. There's also something known as the Edinburgh Award that you can get, which will chronicle all the volunteering, outreach, and other activities that you've done that count towards a kind of unique award that you can show to employers, just to say, well, I've got all this academic knowledge, but also here's some other skills as well that I can put to use.
I think that it's an interesting matter that you flagged up there, the fact that if you study in Scotland, you're going to be doing 4 years, and it does allow students to take other subjects alongside their major. And I would say from my experience that this is one of the most valuable things that a 4-year program can offer students. I was having a conversation a few years ago with someone from the admissions office at one of your neighbouring universities just up on the coast of Fife. And she said to me that the Scottish model of a 4-year program was actually picked up by the United States when they were founding their universities, 200 or 300 years ago, which is quite an interesting thought. But it's also worth flagging up the fact for the listeners that you can go onto a university website, all the British universities have this, and you can look at the employability rates. And that's quite an important data point to have a look at. You can see universities publish what percentage of their graduate students or graduating students are employed usually within 6 months of graduating. And this will give you a little feel about the employability of the students. And very often universities list the sort of careers or the sort of companies that their graduating students move into. Doug, you have done an excellent job in describing all the wonderful things that Edinburgh University has to offer, and I am convinced I want to come to Edinburgh, but how do I maximize my chances of being accepted? Can you talk about the process, the deadlines, the cost of applying, the documents you need, all those sort of things?
Yep. So for Edinburgh's purposes, we will only accept applications via UCAS. So you're very much kind of predetermined by their deadlines and how that works. So just to outline quickly, for those that aren't familiar, UCAS is the kind of national application database within the UK. And what happens is that you submit your choices to various different universities through there. And their deadlines are set in stone. So the early deadline for medicine, veterinary studies, dentistry is in the middle of October. And then for everyone else, the equal consideration deadline for home students in the UK is the last Wednesday of January. And then international students can still apply after that point up until June. But we always say, get your application in on that January deadline. Because we receive a lot of applications and we can't guarantee that we will have places left later in the year. And quite often, a lot of courses will close February, March time at the very, very latest. So for ease and just for peace of mind, get your application in by that January equal consideration deadline. And then in terms of kind of what's the documents that you need and what we look for, well, we need to see predicted grades and this evidence of information from either one of your teachers or guidance counsellors, what you are expected to finish your high school with and what grades you're likely to get, so we can benchmark that against all of the other applications that are coming in from different curricula around the world. That's the key piece of information that we will determine for those that have yet to finish their studies, because fundamentally we're going to look at the academic grades first and solely that, and it's only when we start to filter further down the funnel that we will start to look at personal statements and other information. So the key thing is just to get all of that academic information in first, because we're not going to chase you up if you've not done that in time. So you don't want to unnecessarily rule yourself out.
I think the message here is get your application in before the deadline, because if you're going to be applying to top universities like Edinburgh, there are going to be a lot of other applicants and you really need to get there before the deadline. Doug, I know that in some parts of the world, it's quite commonplace that students use an agent to help them with their applications. Does using an agent actually improve their chances of being accepted?
No, I mean, we will just take every individual application on its own merit. Even we work with particular organisations and agencies around the world. It's not as though if you go through that particular agent, you'll stand a better chance, because fundamentally, we are just going to be looking at your academic grades, the profile of you as an individual student. Naturally agents can help in certain matters and they'll be more familiar with the application process and visa systems and the like, but fundamentally, it's not going to make a difference to that individual application that you're working with, one organization in particular. Everybody, the equal consideration is the key part. Everyone stands the same chance.
We've certainly covered a lot of very, very detailed and valuable information in this podcast episode. Is there anything that you would like to add that we haven't covered so far?
I think that probably the one thing that I want to sort of finish on, I suppose, is it's a daunting process. We get that, and I know that applying to Edinburgh itself can be quite an intimidating thing. But understand the other at our end, we're human beings as well. We've been through this. So if you do have concerns, you do have questions, just get in touch with us. And it doesn't necessarily have to be staff like myself. You can reach out to students. We have text-based chat and ask our students on our website, so you can find out more about individual courses and the like. You don't necessarily have to come physically to Edinburgh to speak to the students on campus tours. There are lots of ways to kind of reach out to us and hopefully give you the information that you need to make the application process easier.
We always encourage our students in the school to have a plan B, because if they are applying to a top competitive university like Edinburgh, they can't guarantee they're going to be offered a place. Is there any other university or universities that you would recommend that they should have on their application list?
I think it always comes down to that right fit for you. I always talk within the Scottish sphere, because I think we're really fortunate that we have such a range of different types of universities that are excellent in different areas. It's very popular for international students to be choosing between ourselves and St Andrews, and we're very different institutions. We're in the middle of a city, much larger. St Andrews is about a third the size of us, in a small town on the coast in Fife, but gives you a very much more campus-based feel that you get to know everyone. So if you're not wanting to be in the middle of a city and just want that kind of small-scale teaching, St Andrews might be a better choice for you. Or it could well be that you're looking for the best possible nightlife and the best kind of, alongside the great teaching. Glasgow could be an option for you. Or if you're very interested in sports, then it could be ourselves, or it could be Stirling, which is kind of Scotland's centre for sporting excellence. So there's lots of different types of universities for you to look into. And I would always say, just reach out to different people at each of those institutions and get that feel for what best meets your own particular interests.
I think it's worth pointing out that Scotland, although it's a relatively small country, has an excellent higher education system and a long tradition of valuing higher education, and a lot of universities and colleges there. In case you as a listener are not quite clear which cities in the UK are in Scotland and which ones are in England, you can just use the filter on the UCAS course search website, and then you can just get a list of Scottish universities. Doug, this has been a great pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for this. I think it's going to be extremely useful for a lot of our listeners who are considering studying in the UK. So you have been listening to Doug Thompson from the University of Edinburgh. Thank you very much, Doug.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Thanks so much for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe and share the Find Your Best Future podcast.